everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we're really excited today. We get a chance to talk with the team behind the new faith-based film, Faith of Angels. And we are starting out talking with director Garrett Batty. And Garrett, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, talking with me.
It's so fun to be here. Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me.
Yeah, so I'm really thrilled to talk with you because I particularly really loved Freetown that year that came out. In fact, I interviewed one of the very first interviews I ever did was with Melissa Liani Larson about Freetown.
Oh, well, that's a good interview to get
Yes.
for your first one or anytime. Melissa is
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah. I was just so impressed with it. I was impressed that it just told a compelling story and didn't worry about ministering to the audience, which was refreshing for a faith-based film.
She has those really unique abilities to kind of walk that fine line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad. I'm glad you say
yeah.
that.
So what was your journey to becoming a director? How did that happen?
So, I mean, this is something that I have always wanted to do. I went to film school after I served a mission and then went to film school at BYU and moved out to LA and just jumped in with both feet.
Mm-hmm.
Worked in LA for several years, absolutely loved it. Just kind of learning my craft and learning all the different skills and aspects required for being able to direct a movie. And then started directing short films and then lots of kind of
Mm-hmm.
commercials or shorter content. I did my first feature in 2009.
So did you grow up with a love of film?
Yes, yeah, it's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. And it's hard for me to relate, Rachel, to people that don't know what they want to do.
Uh-huh.
I talk to my kids that are now in college and saying, "Oh, I don't know, I want to do this, this." I just think, "Oh, what a gift that is to know what you want to
Yeah.
do." The challenge is then that's the only thing I've given myself the option to do. So if it doesn't work out, we're in a world of hurt. But fortunately, we've been able to make a
Yeah.
living as a filmmaker.
So did you have particular films that especially inspired you growing up?
I mean, I think just like any kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, there were certainly have you Back to the Future and Karate Kid and wonderful series like that. Obviously, the Star Wars and then later Lord of the Rings. Those were wonderful
Mm-hmm.
films. I found myself gravitating towards. I loved directors like Robert Zemeckis and Spielberg and um, the, uh, films that I connected with as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they inspired me to continue to try to do what they do.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the first movie you ever saw in a theater?
So one, yeah, I mean, I think the first movie I saw in the theater, first memory I have is walking down to the theater or being dropped off down at the theater. Oh, it was, I don't know if it's close to our home or not. Uh, Maybe I was dropped off. Anyway, my brother and I would go on a Saturday matinee, and I think we watched Snowball Express from Disney. And I think I remember the movie,
Oh.
and you should check it out. It's a great, great movie. I mean, it holds up.
Uh-huh.
But there was a moment in the movie where I think it's a goofy comedy movie. They're riding a snowmobile, and the snowmobile goes into a snowbank, and the film goes dark. The screen is completely dark, and yet the audio continues. And I remember being very curious and very aware of like, okay, there's a decision that's being made here to continue this story and like play with the audience experience, play with this experience of I'm hearing but not seeing stuff. And how cool is that? And how does that happen? And who's the one that gets to decide to make that happen? And so very early on, I try to pay attention to that type of the guiding hand that tells a story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's just interesting those films that are like foundation movies that get you thinking like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. Did you have one?
Yeah, for me, the first movie I ever truly loved was The Little Mermaid. I'm a big
Oh yeah.
animation fan. I love animation and just everything about that movie. I love.
I think our
still to this
family
day.
wore out the tape on Little Mermaid. We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they animated a million bubbles.
Is that right?
Yeah, they had them, and
What a cool
it,
fact.
yeah, I love the story. I love the songs. It's just special. And so that was the first movie I ever really connected with. And then the next one was actually the next year. The first comedy that I ever really loved was Home Alone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember I was having my special 10-year-old trip that we always did, the grandkids did, visiting my grandparents in California, and they took me to see Home Alone. And I remember to this day just dying laughing. That I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. And
Yeah.
I still love it to this day. I still think it's very sweet.
It has a little bit of a heart to
It
it.
does. Yeah.
We obviously remember the paint can and the
Yeah.
broken glass or whatever it is, and we rewatch it with kids and go, oh, there's a tenderness to this
Yeah,
movie.
because really the booby traps are only about 10 minutes of the movie,
They're like 10 minutes,
15.
like the last
Yeah.
10 minutes, right? And the whole
Yeah.
movie before that is I mean, it's investing, it's laying the
Yeah.
breadcrumbs that endear us to this kid
Yeah.
before he turns into this little
I
demon.
love when he steals the toothbrush. He's like
Yeah.
running. It's
Fun,
good.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, so those were two big ones. Clueless was another big one in Jurassic Park. Those are probably my top four.
What was the third one?
Clueless.
Clueless. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, my love of Jane Austen, it like and it basically like defined my high school experience. Clueless.
Well, you mentioned Jane Austen. There's your
Yeah.
throwback to Melissa Leilani Larson. She
Yes.
just has, yeah,
Unbelievable.
yeah.
Her Pride and Prejudice script is her play is so good. Oh,
It's a masterpiece. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, and it continues to show, whatever be performed
Yeah.
all over the
Yeah.
country every year. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, so how did you get this first, you said 2009 Scout Camp. How did you get the first project done? I feel like that would be the hardest one, that first one, getting all those connections and making it happen.
Yeah. Great question. And every film, I've found, at least in my experience, every film is hard to make. But
Sure.
yeah, I mean, that first one is kind of your MBA degree in filmmaking, right? And you say, okay, we're gonna figure out from concept to completion how to first first raise money and then write a script and
Yeah.
then gather the team and build the whole circus that makes this film. Yeah, I mean, it was just a matter of somebody. I was talking with somebody. I do a podcast called um, Truly Independent. We talk about independent film. We had a guest on, and he just said there's a certain amount of never say no, and just hard work and kind of gutting everything out, and also a certain amount of naivete that has to happen that would allow any filmmaker to make their first, second, or third, or for
Yeah.
me, eighth feature film. And so I think it was a matter of me not knowing what I was in for. I said, okay, I'm
And
going to
just
just
going
try
for
to
it.
do this. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And fortunately, it worked out. And then, I mean, that was 2009, and here we are now talking about Faith of Angels that
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
out next this week.
Yes. So, so do you have a guiding kind of philosophy that you like that you think of when you're making these faith-based films that you're trying to do?
Uh, I don't know that that's a really good question. I mean, there's probably just, my my own. I think any filmmaker is going to have an imprint on his or her film, whether they intend to or not. So, for me, to want to make a film or to want to tell a story, it certainly has to have the content that I think will be interesting to an audience, and that I want to invest 2 years of my life, immersing myself
Mhm.
in.
Are
And
you trying to make them for a non Latter-day Saint non audience? Or are you thinking of a specific demographic? Like who are you kind of when you're making them, who are you thinking, who's this for?
uh,
You trying to
I
kind of explain are you trying to make it so it's appealing to everybody or just a smaller demographic?
Yeah, well, I think it would be. I think if you make something for everyone, you make something for nobody.
Right.
And so I can't do that, but I certainly don't want to be exclusionary in my content and say, oh, only, you know, for these types of movies, for a feature film, yes, I would love to play to a more broad audience than perhaps, you know, the Provo College crowd.
Right. Yeah.
Let's expand that to let's go. I'm for this particular one. I was fascinated that we have a boy that's lost in an abandoned mine, and it becomes a national news story. So much that the president of the United States at the time, George H.W. Bush, says that this story is evidence that miracles still happen. And to me, that goes, okay,
Yeah.
well, that is a story that's broad enough that can play beyond the mountains of Utah where it took place. When I
Hmm.
wrote the script and sent it out, we have actors like John Michael Finley from I Can Only Imagine who are responding and saying, this is an amazing story. I
Hmm.
want to be a part of this. Or Cameron Arnett, who stars in The Forge right now, saying, I don't know much about the so what I do know about is faith and,
Yeah.
and Christianity, and I want to be a part of this movie because it
Hmm.
just exudes those principles.
Ho, ho, ho! We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind the scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
Yeah. Well, I guess just what's impressed me about your films is that I have never felt like they are preachy or that they're overly concerned with ministry. And some faith-based films, that's clearly the focus and not the story. Like they even have like a ministry like big kind of promo at the end of the movie, and people do whatever they want to do, but I've just been impressed where I always felt like the focus of your films was on a particular person, a particular story, and that I think that anybody listening, because most of our audience is not Latter-day Saint, and I think anybody listening could enjoy any of your films.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I'll take that as a compliment, and I think it does start with the story and say, well,
Mm,
I will focus on the story and what happened in these events. But all of my, well, most of my films that audiences are familiar with are based on true stories. So I feel like as a writer, I have an onus to stick to that story to
mm,
figure out. Now, I mean, obviously, we have the structure of a narrative film, and so my goal is to make sure that I have story elements that are true, that fit those points of those narrative points of
mhm.
storytelling.
Yeah, yeah.
And fortunately, with Faith of Angels, that was evident that there were all the beats there that we needed this. We've got the boy that's lost in a mine that creates this tension. We have a ticking clock that, hey, there's a countdown. If we don't find this boy,
Yeah.
there's very high stakes. And then we have this element of a man who feels these angelic promptings that he's supposed to be the one to help find this boy. And the opposition is he's not qualified. He doesn't have the expertise or the training. He's perhaps a little bit older or out of shape and shouldn't be crawling around in a mine. And so there were these natural antagonist protagonist elements that I think fit that could make this tell this very miraculous story, but in a very comfortable narrative format that moviegoers are used to.
And it happened in the it was the 70s or 80s?
Yeah, 1989. So this is
1989.
pre-cell
Okay.
phone, pre-internet.
Yeah.
This was everybody trying to get their information from the evening news.
Yeah.
And you have the evening news then that reports that, hey, a miracle took place.
So how did you first hear about this story? How did the project evolve?
So it's based on this individual, this young boy named Joshua Dennis,
Mhm.
and his family reached out to me
Oh, wow.
after we were put in contact, um, and they said that that here's a story that might be interesting to you, and I love that. I love when people reach out.
Yeah.
I get fortunately I get those types of conversations, uh, at least once a week, several times a month. And they're always wonderful stories, and sometimes they're more maybe appropriate for, or maybe the target audience would be the family reunion rather than a nationwide audience.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody has, I mean, these incredible, inspiring stories, and I'm grateful to be able to hear them.
Yeah. So that's cool. That's very flattering that the people recognize that you tell people's true stories well, so they reach out to you.
Sure, yeah, and I try not to take that for granted. I mean, yes, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. So I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but so you kind of have two things happening in this movie. You've got John Skinner, who is feeling these promptings to get involved, and then you have Joshua Dennis, the boy, in the cave. And was that tricky, kind of balancing those two storylines?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think the key, it was tricky and yet it helped. And so, what drew me to this story initially was this Dennis family reached out and said, "Hey, here's this experience that, people have tried to tell in a story. They've written scripts. They have hasn't been quite right. Is this something you'd consider?" And so I sat with the Dennis family and chatted with them and heard about what they went through in this 5 day period and what Josh maybe felt and experienced and even those elements, these angelic elements. And I was immediately drawn to these angelic elements. And so I started working on that story, that element of it. And they reached out and they said, we want to make sure that we recognize all of the other individuals that were such a key part of this. And so we did. So I did. I started to reach out to John Skinner, who was one of the searchers, and then Gary and Ray were also searchers, actual people that entered the mine and looked for this young boy. Um, and each one of them had these uniquely sort of interactions or feelings with angelic intervention. Um, and that is, I think, the point where I go, okay, this is a story about angels, whether they are seen or felt. Um, all of these points of light, these angels that are perhaps helping facilitate this miracle. And it was fascinating that the individual parties wouldn't necessarily know about the other people and what they were going through, and yet they were all having this very powerful shared experience.
Mm.
Um, so
Yeah.
I think once we cracked that, then yes, it became apparent how I wanted to tell this story.
Mhm. So the scenes in the cave, was that a set? How was that shot?
So we filmed outside of Ophir, actually at the Ophir mine, uh, and there was a big rock, tunnel cut through the mine, and we were able to build some elements attached to that mine, uh, to keep our actors safe and warm and clean. Uh, and then so it's a little bit of a hybrid between being in an actual mine and then some pieces that were built. Our production designer is Key Miller, and he just does fantastic work and made that hopefully seamless
Yeah.
and made it
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, was that challenging working with the young actor who's playing Joshua and getting the intensity of that kind of experience out?
Well, it was a joy. It was a joy to work with Michael Bradford. Um, and yeah, I mean, Michael came and auditioned for the movie. And I'll tell you, Rachel, here's what I have to confess. Maybe I should say this before you tell me what you thought of his performance. Uh, but Michael is my son.
Ah,
And it's fun that people don't realize that and people
oh,
didn't realize that. One of the things that drew me to the story is that Michael and I had always wanted to do a movie, and or we talked about doing a movie, and so when this idea came up, this opportunity came up, I said, "Would you like to do this?" And he was intrigued with the story, but said, "I'd like to do it, but I don't want to get the role just because I'm the director's kid. Like I want
hmm.
to actually do it." And so he said, okay. He said, let's use a different name. And he said, okay, you can use Michael Bradford or Tom Holland. Uh, and so he let me choose Michael Bradford. And then he auditioned. He sent in a tape to our casting director. Casting director is one of the top casting directors in the state and does Kevin Costner movies and Taylor Sheridan shows, and he watched all of the tapes for all of the kids that were trying out, and he sent his top ones back, and Michael was one of them. And so we did an in-person audition, and Michael had to come in and audition for the casting director. And at any rate, I finally had to confess that he was my son, and the casting
They
director
had
said,
no idea?
no, no, no.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, you got to use him. He said, if you don't use him, you're making the wrong movie. And I was so excited for that. And then even on set, the cast didn't know. We didn't want it to be like, oh, here's these all, you know, professional actor, John Michael Finley from I Can Only Imagine, Cameron Arnett, and the director's kid.
Uh-huh.
And so Michael just kind of stayed. He was kind of doing a double acting job, right? Because he was Michael
Yeah,
Bradford on
yeah.
set and did a great job. And kind of as the movie started to wrap up, people like, rumors spread like, wait,
So were
the
you
director's.
working with mostly new people that didn't know him as your son, or
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. I mean, these are all
okay?
professional actors. I mean, certainly Kirby, Michael had the chance to work with Kirby. Kirby plays the dad in the movie, and
Yeah,
so Kirby came over to my house, and we rehearsed and improvised
yeah.
and practiced that. But Michael is a trained actor. I mean, he has an agent, he has an acting coach, and
Yeah,
just did a great job. And so
that's
yeah, it was
great.
fun
Yeah, you did great.
throughout the shoot to be able to, as people were picking up on it, to be like, wait, is he? Do you? I say, yeah, I've known him a while, and
You didn't find it any harder to kind of give critiques or anything like that for your own son?
I think his level of professionalism made me up my game, made me like, oh, okay,
Mm,
I need to make sure that he gets treated just like any other actor. There was
hmm.
one time, Rachel, where I broke character on that, and it's when Michael showed up on set, and as the movie goes, this boy is lost in the mind for day after day after day, and gets increasingly gaunt and dirty, and he showed up. His first day on set was that so he had gone through makeup and had that appearance. And so as I'm directing, working on a scene, and I look up in the corner of my eye and I see my son that looks like he's just been run over by a truck. And it was like, okay, stop. What's going on? What happened? And immediately people were like, my producing partner Darren's like, okay, he's just here he's been through makeup. We're gonna get him in. And so I had to, yeah,
Yeah,
cool my fatherly instincts and get
yeah.
back to work.
Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. So how did you end up getting John Michael Finley involved in this project? Was he somebody you wanted from the beginning?
Yes, I'm a huge admirer of John Michael Finley. The work that he did in I Can Only Imagine. That is his first film,
Yeah.
and he's opposite Dennis Quaid, and I mean, he was the lead in that movie, and just did such an authentic, like
Yeah.
human performance. And so,
That was a good one.
yeah, it's just so
I
good,
liked
right?
that. Yeah.
And I reached out. I mean, I sent him an email, and I went up to one of our locations and I took a picture of the location, which was just this beautiful river with colored trees, and I drew a little picture of him, put his name on it, said, John Michael Finley, we want you here, and sent him the script and that, and he immediately got it and responded. I was grateful for his response. We chatted at length about the project and kind of where we were and what we wanted to do with it. And he was very receptive, uh, and we've become dear friends
Yeah.
since. I love working with him.
Yeah, yeah. It was really good. And like you said, it has a great cast with Kirby Hayborn in it as well. That must have been
Yeah,
fun to get him involved.
Kirby was in my first movie in Scout Camp,
Mm-hmm.
and so to be able to call him again and say, "Hey, we're getting the band back together. Would you like to come play with us?" And fortunately, he was available and very, very willing.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, Cameron Arnett, who is just this incredible, name brand actor for faith-based film. He's in the Kendrick Brothers movies, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now his movie is in the top 10 in the country, The Forge. And
Mm.
so we were so grateful to have Cameron. Same thing. We reached out to him, say, "Hey, here's this fun role." He plays the sheriff in the movie, and he is the opposite of that role. I mean, he's such a kind and gentle and loving individual, and he really gravitated. He really created
Mhm.
a fascinating character there.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you how was the shoot? I'm assuming you did like all the cave scenes in one batch. You did all the like how did that all
Yeah,
happen?
it's always this balance. Our first AD is a guy named Matt Schramer, and he knows how to build a schedule and does a great job at that. We're always balancing actors' schedule. We only have Cameron for a week, and so we do have to shoot his stuff first, and we kind of group that
Mm,
all together. It might require us to go to a location and then come back to mines. Um, but yeah, we try to schedule both. To pay attention to the actors' needs and then the time of year. We knew we wanted the trees to be the right color during kind of that initial scene, so we scheduled that toward the end of the shoot. We shot a year ago in September, and those trees started to turn just at the end of September, so we needed to make sure that those were scheduled late. But it's a balancing act, uh, and trying to figure out
hmm.
logistics of how to do all that.
Well, so much of being a director is a balancing act. I find it fascinating. You're kind of like the CEO of the movie, and like that must be exciting and challenging. Like you got to work with the editor, make sure that the right edits are being made. You got to work with the director of photography, everything, just making all these pieces come together.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great analogy. And the joy is finding incredibly talented people
Mm-hmm.
to do that and then staying out of their way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our director of photography is Ryan Little, who's an incredible director in his own, under his own titles. He's done the Saints and Soldiers movies and
Mm-hmm.
some great TV series, and to be able to call Ryan and say, "Hey, come, would you consider shooting this movie?" And Ryan shoots all his own movies as well. And I knew he had the talent, and I was so glad that he was available. And then we've got, Key Miller as our production designer, and then our Emma Muirs is our wardrobe, and she designs all of these. Not only does she, find clothes from the 80s, but she coordinates them and be like, okay, this character is this color, and we need to make sure that that their apparel represents that, and so forth. And yeah, if we build this incredible team, our editors are Andy Matthews and Aaron Tharp, and they've cut two of my movies now, and they just do a great job. I find if I bring the team together and then let them do their thing and just make sure that they're all doing it in sync,
Mm-hmm.
then that's I get to do
Yeah.
my it's a fun
Yeah.
job to do.
Well, I have to ask real quick. I see, according to IMDb, you have done some Studio C episodes. And
Yes.
what
Yeah.
is that like? 'Cause we love them.
Studio C is so fun, and those
Yeah.
guys have become dear friends. And I was glad the showrunner, Jake Van Wagner, he was my producing partner on Saratov Approach. And so he's, gone on to just do incredible things. And now for the past 3 years has been the showrunner of Studio C.
Hmm.
And he's probably one of the the funniest guys you will ever talk to.
Yeah.
And so to be able to like break away from maybe these serious, feature films and hang out for a few days with just this collection of wonderful comedians,
I would
it's
think it
always
would be
nice.
hilarious. I would
It's
think
hilarious.
I'd be like holding in.
In fact, Tanner, that's kind of where I met Tanner Gilman, who plays in the movie. Tanner comes in and does some great kind of lighter levity scenes in Faith of Angels, and he's just so fun to have on set.
Well, very good. Thank you so much. I'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Harpeth Road Publishing and author Terry Wilson and her new book, Christmas Charms. This is a delightful holiday read that you can get in the Christmas spirit now in September. Ashley James is supposed to be having the Christmas of her dreams. After 4 years of working at an upscale jewelry store in Manhattan, she will finally get a little velvet box of her own, and she knows exactly when her boyfriend Jeremy is taking her on a romantic trip to Paris. What could go wrong? Pretty much everything. A gorgeously festive Christmas story from New York Times bestselling author Terry Wilson. It will have you reaching for the candy canes and sugar drops. You can pick up Christmas Charms wherever you purchase your books online or in person, and you can use the affiliate link below and go to Harpeth Road for more information. That's harpethroad.com. For the second part of this episode, we have the star of Faith of Angels. We have John Michael Finley on. And John, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks for working with me. Happy to be here.
So this is your first time on our show, so we like to give our guests an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got into acting. You're most predominantly stage actor, right?
Correct. Yeah. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from the Arkansas, Missouri area, and did some drama in high school and really fell in love with it and started taking it seriously. And I was doing choir and theater and that kind of stuff, all while also playing sports. And where I come from, it's sports, and so I had such a great background and was kind of new to the theater and the arts and storytelling and performing, and just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough, I went to school in the Chicago area. After Chicago, working professionally in Chicago for a few years, we migrated to New York City to do some Broadway work, and I've been fortunate enough to do a few Broadway shows. And then from Broadway, I kind of got the bug in kind of the film and TV world because some opportunities came my way. And so now I feel like I fully got the bug. I love doing camera work and film and TV, and I still love the stage. In fact, I look a little shaggy right now. I'm growing beard and hair out for a new Broadway project coming out. I can't say too much about it. You know how that works. But there's a new show coming at the end of the year, and I'm very happy to be jumping on board that train. So
I'm a theater critic as well as a film critic.
Wonderful. Okay, wonderful.
So theater has my heart. I love it so much.
I'm so with you on that. I have people ask me all the time on both sides of the art form, and I say, I think I love them both, and I'm sure I love them equally. But I really want to spend as much time as I can in both genres, and I think they're so different and so beautiful. I think they get compared a lot, but I really think they're very different. Different genres.
Well, it's different energy because it's a live performance.
Yeah.
I think about other takes.
There are tough days on set where you're there from, sun up to sundown, and then some overtime hours, and then you get a few hours of sleep and you're back on set the next morning. Like, there are long days in film and TV. But then I think about Broadway doing 400 shows a year, 8 shows a week, for 50 weeks out of the year. So it's a kind of a marathon versus a sprint, but I think they both take quite a lot out of you. And so they're just a blast.
You must have been over the moon to get to play Jean Valjean.
Oh, Valjean was amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Valjean was a dream role. It still is. I'm closer to 40 now than 30. And so, even when I played Valjean, I still felt a little young, but I feel like that's a role that hopefully I can do for another 20, 30 years. But an absolute dream role.
Yeah.
When I went to school for theater, I wasn't really sure who Jean Valjean was. There were several shows that I wasn't familiar with because I didn't really grow up in a culture that had a lot of Broadway stuff in it. So it was kind of new to me, but Valjean
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Oh,
However, when you understudy superstars, there's nothing quite like standing at the lip of the stage and the lights dim and the music's about to come on and they make the announcement, please turn your cell phones off. And you hear, Alfie Boe will not be performing today. The role of Jean Valjean will be John Michael Finley. You hear just, boo! People get really
like
upset when they
shoot.
don't see their superstars. But I
Yeah.
hope to go out there and still impress them and show them that, we can still
Yeah.
get the job done. So it's a blast.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be kind of deflating.
Yeah. But it makes you want to go out there and,
Yeah.
show them what you can do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the beginning of Les Mis, he's kind of bitter and hard up anyway. So
There
maybe
you go. Just fuel to the fire. I'm sure there was a time years ago when Alfie was an understudy, and I bet he went
Sure.
through the same thing, and now he's
Yeah.
the guy. So,
Yeah.
the circle of life continues. Yeah.
Well, and it must be interesting then being in a comedic performance with Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try to tell people, I'm an artist, I'm an actor, I have a vivid imagination. I think
Uh-huh.
all of us when we were kids,
Yeah.
uh, the floor is lava and you jump
Sure.
around, you can go
Sure.
climb a tree. I had a really good teacher in college that said, don't forget that it's called a play for a reason,
Yeah.
And so I really fell in love with kind of the play aspect of it, the imaginative fun part of it. So I do think there are parts of me that are Jean Valjean. I look
Yeah.
more Jean Valjean right now. I'm a father, I'm a husband, but at the same time, there's a lot of me that was Elder Cunningham from the
Yeah.
Book of Mormon. And so that was a blast to go. I made my Broadway debut in Les Mis, did that for a year,
Uh-huh.
and then took a little bit of time off. And in that time off, I filmed my first movie.
Yeah.
And then I went straight into the Book of Mormon. And you're
Yeah.
right, it was like night and day. It's a completely different atmosphere, completely different vibe. But I'm just so thankful and grateful that I've had the opportunities to play like such different characters. And I can tell you, Arnold Cunningham is therapeutic to play
Yeah.
that guy. Yeah, he's just the sweetest, most pure, innocent soul. Very therapeutic.
Well, it must have been funny though when you got the Faith of Angels and you're in a Utah Mormon movie. That must have been kind of ironic.
Well, I knew it would be fun, and I know from experience how wonderful the community is in Utah, and how wonderful the Mormons are, and the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the musical certainly has some moments where it kind of pokes fun,
Sure.
but I
Sure.
think in a lot of ways it's mostly good spirited, and certainly my friends in Utah have taken it the best way they possibly can. And
Mhm.
there's a lot in the musical to love. There's
Yeah.
certainly a few things that go over the top, but it was a blast knowing that I was
Mhm.
going to spend a few weeks in Utah, because everyone's first question is, what shows have you done? And I can say, well, yeah, I've done the Book of Mormon, and they go, oh, and I don't think they realize that not a lot of that is going to cross over. There
Right.
might be a few things, but most of my friends in the Utah area have never been to New York to see the show in New York,
Right.
and most of my New York Mormon friends,
Right.
probably
Right.
have a different cultural vibe where they can see shows like that. So it's always amazing to me. But people are so generous. They love to hear about my experiences. They love to hear about the show. They love to hear about reactions from the show. And so both have experienced were
Yeah.
great.
Well, we have a great tradition of musical theater in Utah. So if anybody was going to be understanding, it would be us.
I love that. I love it. My first Javert when I got to Broadway. What is his name? He's a former Utah actor.
Oh, okay.
Will, good grief,
Swenson.
Swenson. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will Swenson was my Javert when
Oh.
I first got to
Oh
Broadway.
my
'Cause he
gosh.
had come back to help out because someone was sick and injured. So I also have that connection. I know Will was a great actor. He still was a great
Oh, yeah,
actor, but
yeah,
did a
yeah.
lot of work in Utah.
Yeah.
And I have several Mormon friends, some from the Book of Mormon, that are Mormon,
Yeah,
and great folks, great people that live in the New York area. And so
Yeah.
I've had so many great connections, Utah to New York.
So how did you end up getting the role in I Can Only Imagine? How did they even think of you for this film part if you were a stage actor?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. If I can remember correctly, I really do have to rack my brain because it's been almost 10 years since that process started for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had just moved to New York City with my wife, now my wife, and girlfriend at the time, and we were trying to make our dream work. And I had booked Les Miserables. I was understudying Jean Valjean, so I had a great job, a great gig. I wasn't looking to go anywhere. I had worked so hard to finally get my foot in the door with Broadway that, if Les Mis would have run 30 years, I think I would have stayed with the show for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so about 8 or 9 months into my first contract, I'm happy as a clam. I'm, one of the youngest people in the cast. I had the least amount of experience. So I'm just there to hang on, enjoy the ride, learn a lot. And I get an email from my agent, a breakdown is what we call it. And it's describing a movie being made about the song I Can Only Imagine.
Did you know
And
the song?
of course,
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
an immediate reaction to that song. I grew up in
Yeah.
the Midwest. I was a teenager in the late 90s, early
Yeah.
2000s, the
It's such a good
grunge,
song.
rock, praise and worship era. And don't get me wrong, I love the old hymnals. I grew up Southern Baptist, so I love reading the shape notes. I love reading music. I love the old hymnals with just a piano. But I also grew up as a young man with praise and worship and really good music in those
Yeah.
mid to late 90s, early 2000s, including I Can Only Imagine. I remember going to church camp and buying that CD for the first time and just having it on repeat, in my bunk bed at church camp. It was so much fun. And I saw Mercy Me in concert 2 or 3 times, I think, when I was a teenager at events and church camps and stuff like that. So I was very familiar with the song. And so I thought, well, this is going to be a smash hit. The song is like one of the most popular Christian songs of
Yeah.
all time.
It's such a good
Um,
song.
it's a
Yeah.
great song. And so, I read the script and I was blown away by the script. And so I knew that I had to, put together a really good audition because they needed someone who could sing, they needed someone who could act. And so, I was working on Broadway. I couldn't get to LA where they were having in-person auditions. So I sent in a tape. I did my best to put a really good tape together where I sang about half the song. I did 2 or 3 sides that they had sent through my agent. So we sent a tape and then we didn't really hear back. I think it was 2 or 3 months later. My agent at the time, I have a different agent now, but my agent at the time, she really pushed, she really kept checking in, like, have you watched the video? Is there an intern that could watch the video? Is there someone
Right.
that could, and so I'm really grateful for that. But I think after they had kind of an extensive search looking for the role of Bart, which was really specific, and I think they were having trouble finding that, I think they
Yeah.
eventually watched my tape. And from my understanding, the producing team was already in the New York area that week when the casting director had watched my video. And so they kind of set it all up. They said, you know what, we'll come. And they came and they saw me perform in Les Mis. And then the next morning we had like a callback in New York. So they were kind enough to say, hey, we watched your video. I think we see something that might be able to work here. I didn't have any film experience. I didn't have any TV experience. I just made my Broadway debut. I'm 26, 27 years old, just flying by the seat of my pants. And it changed my life. It was
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, it was great.
Oh my gosh, you
So
must have
that
freaked
was pretty
out.
much it. I was so freaked out. But
Yeah.
what better way to showcase your talents and be like, hey, come to New York, come to a
Yeah.
Broadway show. I'll do Jean Valjean that
Yeah.
night. And so they got to
Yeah.
come, and I think they came twice. Once to see me in my regular track, my ensemble track, and then I think they came back with the real Bart and his wife, and the directors and
Oh
the
wow.
producers, a whole big team. And my wife was there. We got to have dinner after the show. So they were really incredible, really great. And once that all happened, I was like, okay, if they don't offer me this role, then somebody else must have nailed the audition because
Yeah.
I thought I did a really good job. So it was just one of those meant to be things. And of course, they were playing hard to get. They were business. But I come to find out later that they're like, oh, as soon as we met you, we knew. As soon as we saw you perform, and I was like, well, you sure strung me along for a couple of weeks. So yeah, it was a fantastic experience, and I'm still very close with almost every single person involved in that project. Because at the time, that was an independent, film, just
Yeah.
trying to make its way above, above sea level. So now these guys are, they kind of went from making one film every 3 or 4 years to 3 or 4 films every year now. So I'm just proud of those guys, and it's a great project. I'm glad you asked about that.
Oh yeah. I really enjoyed the film. I was crying my eyes out. And, a lot of faith-based films are a bit hit and miss for me. Sometimes they're a
Mhm.
little too ministry focused and not enough about the story. And I thought that what was impressive about I Can Only Imagine is it was just about this one man's journey. And it wasn't trying to convert you
Yeah.
to a particular movement.
I think that's so well said,
Yeah.
Rachel. Really well said. When I first read the script, as an actor, that I only get one chance at a first impression.
Yeah.
Once we film, they'll put together a rough draft, and as an actor, you'll get to see an unedited version. But even that, you've already told the whole story. So really, that first script read is my real first impression. And when I first read I Can Only Imagine, I think like everyone else, I just assumed it was a sweet, beautiful song about singing to God, singing to your heavenly Father. We all know we're going to die one day, and what's it going to be like when we get there, and what are we going to see? And come to find out, there's this entire traumatic story, incredible story about a boy and his daddy. And so I just knew that people would catch, it would catch
Yeah.
on like fire, the same way the song did. But I think the song, to your point, does the same thing. It doesn't preach. I told Bart, I said, Bart, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze this, but I think one of the most powerful parts of your song and your songwriting is that you just ask questions. I think so many people
Yeah.
would write a song and say, this is what I want when I get to heaven, and this is what I'm going to see, and this is who I'm going to hug, and this is what I'm going to say to Jesus, and this is what I'm going to say. And I think Bart was just like, I don't know what I do.
Mhm.
Would I sing? Would I be speechless? Would I fall to my knees? Who would I hug? And I think what's so beautiful about it is that he really just invites us to walk through the gates together. He just, I don't know what I do, but here's maybe what I do. And I think it's so humble. It's so unassuming. It's so non-preachy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's beautiful about the song. And I hope, we captured a little bit of that in
Yeah.
the film.
And the Amy Grant actress, she looks exactly like her. It was unreal.
She's so talented. And if you see Nicole do something else, first of all, she doesn't have the same color eyes.
Yeah.
Like they put color contacts in. She does look exactly like Amy.
She looks so much like her. It was unbelievable.
I remember when they called me, because they were trying to keep me up to date, keep me excited. And they said, you will not believe, we just auditioned an actor who looks just like Amy Grant. And I was so excited. And then I got to meet her and work with her.
Yeah.
I mean, the real Amy is incredible. The real Amy is a household name, a legend. But Nicole, who was really, really in fact, she's so good that people have a hard time separate. People think that Amy Grant starred in I Can Only Imagine. And I think it was really confusing for people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a testament to her performance. Yeah.
The cool, crisp days of fall are calling. Fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time to go back to school thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. Crush your wellness goals this month with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Keep kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. head to factormeals.com/hallmarkies50. Use the code hallmarkies50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code hallmarkies50 at factormeals.com/hallmarkies50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Well, so the Faith of Angels, your character, it's an interesting character because he is kind of separated from a lot of the action that's happening with the everything going on at the cave, but obviously involved, but it's more like introspective. And I feel like it must have been challenging to kind of figure out how to kind of bring that character to life.
Such a great observation. I felt the same way after reading the script. So I had 100 questions for Garrett, you know. But I knew as an actor that this was going to be a lot of just me and my internal monologue.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, John does have a lot of dialogue. You know, he's got scenes with his wife. He's got scenes with some of the search and rescue crew, you know, big scenes with the sheriff. But a lot of John in the film is just like, what's going on in his head? What's going on behind his eyes? What's going on? You know, and so we really did our best to try to capture that. You know, how could we really say more by saying less? And some of it was intentional, and some of it I think was just accidental. You know, but I really was separated from a lot of that storytelling. And I think, you know, once you've had a chance to see the film, I believe you've had a chance to see it, but you'll realize that, you know, John is disconnected, but there is something else that's kind of connecting the whole story. You know, John feels a calling, he's hearing a voice, things like that. And so I think that's his connection ultimately, you know, that brings him back. But I think you bring up a great point. A lot of this film is kind of John separated and John's introspection. And as an actor, it could be challenging, but I also think it's a lot of fun. You really just have to relax and kind of breathe and be in front of the camera and let that work. So I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it.
Well, so you had, the most scenes with the actress who plays your wife. And so that must have been kind of interesting to work with her and get those scenes.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. You know, when I touched down in Salt Lake City, I had never been to Utah before. So it really was my first experience. I knew I was going to be there for 3 or 4 weeks. And I knew pretty much everyone I was going to be meeting was going to be, you know, a stranger. And so I don't mind those experiences. That's what makes, you know, the job really thrilling and really fun. But it is a challenge to meet a complete stranger and then develop a personal relationship with them. And this person's married. This person has children. This person already has her own personal, intimate relationships. And so she was great. Ivy is her name. Ivy Lloyd Mitchell was a fantastic actor cast. But we didn't get really any interaction before. My 3-year-old boy is right here. I didn't get any interaction with her really before I met her. But I remember flying to the set, and I told Garrett, the director, I said, "Man, I don't even think we should turn the cameras on until I meet John and get to talk with John." I was having like a lot of anxiety. I was like, I just got to meet John, even if it's a FaceTime. I cannot start the day until we meet John, because I had a lot of my preparation was done and I was ready to go, but that missing puzzle piece was just the living, breathing.
So you did get to talk with him, the real John Skinner.
I was in a trailer getting my hair cut because I showed up like this, big old beard, and I had hair past my chest, like even longer hair.
Oh, wow.
I like to grow it out if I don't have anything to do, you know? So I came in looking like a caveman, and so I'm getting my hair cut. And John and Chris walk in, and I probably got 5 to 10 minutes with them. You know, I got to hear him tell his side of the story. But what I love, and I tell everyone, you know, you can meet a man and you can learn a lot about him, but when you meet a man's wife and you talk to his wife, I really wanted to talk to Chris, because John could tell me 100 things about him from John's perspective, you know. And so I got to meet John and Chris, and once I had that conversation, and then they turned the swivel chair around, and I had the mustache and the hair. I was like, here we go. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, do you feel like your faith increased from playing this character that is such a faithful character? I mean, he really believes in these things.
I can answer that directly. I think my faith, certainly my faith in people has increased. You know, I what I love about this film including the title, is I think it's somewhat what's the word I'm looking for? Interpretive.
Mm-hmm.
The faith of angels. I truly believe that the angels in this story were the community members that gathered around and didn't give up and were searching and searched the entire mountain and put on orange vests and asked the whole. I really think that energy from these people really saved this young boy and encouraged everyone involved to not give up. And so I love telling these true stories. This is the second time I've had the privilege, honestly, to not only play a real character, but play a real character who's still alive, and to be able to pick their brain and talk to their spouse and talk to their children and talk to their siblings and their family. And there's just something so powerful. As an actor, it's my job to make up a story. But when you tell a true story, sometimes you don't have to make
Right.
anything up. My job is to just try to channel the real story that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I think it's increased my faith in people.
Mm-hmm.
I think people can really come together and do incredible things. And I think this is an example where, the people were probably a piece of the puzzle, but I think the people really came together and saved a life here. And that to me is really inspirational. And that's why I'm so grateful to be celebrating with this community 36 years later.
Yeah. What was so impressive about John was that he felt this calling, but it didn't make any sense. And it's so easy to just kind of, brush those things off.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He was persistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I bet everybody has had that feeling where you're trying to stay busy, you're trying to get something done, and you can't focus. Your mind is just being pulled.
Mm-hmm.
And the real story is John was trying to write a book. The beginning couple scenes of this film is John kind of on a solo adventure out in the middle of nowhere, trying to get some writing done, trying to clear his head, trying to do some fishing.
Yeah.
And so he was supposed to be out there for 3 or 4 weeks, and I think he cut his trip in half and just in the middle of the night drove home. And so I think anyone who's had that experience knows that you can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't really do anything you set your mind to because you're just so distracted by this force, this calling, this pull. And so, we haven't really gotten too specific into that. I haven't necessarily asked John specifically, what did you feel? What did you hear?
Mm-hmm.
But I know I can sense when someone felt enough that they knew, okay, I'm going to take a risk here. I'm going to switch. I'm going to call an audible. And that's what John did. He drove straight home. And I think the confirmation was pretty much as soon as he got home, his wife was like, oh, thank God you're here. I think the sheriff was asking for you. John, of course, is like, what do you mean? And I think that immediately confirmed that maybe this isn't just a stomach bug or I'm hungry or something. Maybe this is something bigger than us. And so, yeah, I thought that was a powerful part of the story as well.
Well, and most of our listeners aren't Latter-day Saints. And so
Okay.
what would you say if you were going to pitch it to somebody like yourself that's not Latter-day Saint? How would we pitch it that they'll enjoy this film? They'll get something out of it.
Sure. There's no denying, and I don't know why we would, there's no denying that this is a faith-based film.
Sure.
But for someone who grew up not Latter-day Saints, I mentioned earlier, I grew up Southern Baptist. I think if you grew up Latter-day Saints, you will know immediately that this is a community of Latter-day Saints.
Sure.
But I think if you didn't grow up in or around the Church of the Latter-day Saints, I don't think you would assume this is a story about Mormons or the Church of, you know what I mean?
Right.
There's a couple hymns, there's a couple church scenes, but once again, as someone who grew up Protestant, Christian, I know that there are hymns that aren't Southern Baptist. There are Methodist hymns, there are Pentecostal hymns,
Sure.
there are Baptist hymns, there are Catholic hymns. And so I think I would just assume that was some other denomination that had a different kind of hymn.
Know.
Yeah. And so I don't think this movie, for someone who's not in the Church of Latter-day Saints, I don't think it reeks of Latter-day Saints, in my opinion. But I think it certainly is a faith-based film. As far as a pitch, once again, I'm going to go back to this community. I think this is a film. This is a true story retelling of a traumatic experience that this community experienced 35 years ago. And by coming together when all hope was lost, Obviously, there's somewhat of a happy ending, but when all hope was lost, these people stuck it out, and by coming together, they found a positive outcome. And I think true stories are so impactful, real true stories, and these people are still alive. Well, we know in a couple of weeks we're going to go walk the red carpet and hold hands and hug, and we're going to, with this community, 35 years later, we're going to go tell their story. And I cannot be more grateful for that as an actor, as an artist, as a person, as a father and a husband. So I'm excited about that. I think people are going to love it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming talking with us. Really appreciate it. It's great to get to meet you, and look forward for that Broadway role coming up.
Absolutely. I can't wait to share a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And thank you for having me on. I loved talking about everything we talked about, and I loved your questions. Thank you.
I don't know if you have social media or anything like that you want to share.
I do. I keep my Facebook a little more private, but I would love to shout out my Instagram. It's John_Michael_Finley. John Michael Finley. Hit me up on Instagram. I like to post videos, news updates, videos of me singing, just kind of goofing around, stuff like that. So absolutely, I appreciate that.
Oh, awesome. We'd like to thank John and Garrett for coming on the podcast. This was a ton of fun. I hope you enjoyed it. It's so interesting to hear about how films are made. And I hope y'all check out the movie Faith of Angels. I think it was a really solid little faith-based film. And you can follow me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. Also, make sure you're following the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. Really appreciate that. If you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have the Patreon group, which is the biggest way you can support us. I really appreciate that support, and the merch store. So check that out. And thanks so much again, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.